Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Hanford, and my wife, Danae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. Before we get started, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com. On the podcast with us today is Les Dossey. He is the chief entrepreneur at Entre Coach, a simplification coaching company for already successful, ambitious, and growth-oriented entrepreneurs. Welcome to the podcast, Les.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Look forward to chatting with you and Danae today.
Hi, Les, and thank you for being with us. Take us through just for a couple of minutes and kind of fill us in on how you became a coach and some of the business background that you have and some of the experiences that you've had.
Sure. I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur from the first experience I had with an exchange. I found that I could redeem soda pop bottles that I found in the ditches at my local A&P. And I knew from that moment on that I would probably want to be in a position where I could call my own shots. So when I got out of high school, I immediately went in to business for myself. And because I was really good with my hands and loved building things and fixing things, I went into the construction industry and was immediately successful and grew several businesses and sold them in the beginning years. But at the same time, I was going through kind of a crucible for about a 29-year period. It started with the death of my first girlfriend. She was 13, died from Rocky Mountain tick fever. Then a car full of buddies when I was a junior in high school. Then a friend right after I got out of high school took his own life. And then I got married and we had our first child. And my first son was born with a defective right ventricle. So they did an operation and it was miraculous how fast he recovered and bounced back. And we took him home and they told us that at age 5, he'd have to have that procedure done again. Well, the second time around, we weren't as fortunate. He died from a bad reaction to anesthesia. So as you can imagine, that was heartbreaking and gut-wrenching and every other kind of, a bad thing you could imagine. Well, then several years later, my younger sister got colon cancer and died very quickly. It was about a 6-month period. Not long after that, my younger brother fell off the back of his golf cart and hit his head, got a brain aneurysm and died. And so that's just a kind of a brief glimpse of that period of time where I was kind of going through this crucible, and it just over time built up and became more than I could carry. And so I had a really dark night where I asked God to let me take my last breath. I didn't want my future to continue if it was going to be like what I'd been experiencing in my past. So it was that fateful night that this transition began, and I realized that God had something bigger in store for me. I wasn't sure what it was at that point. And over the next 6 to 8 months, he began to reveal it to me through journaling and through some other experiences. I met my now wife on a blind date, and there was a conversation that she and I had in the first 6 weeks of our relationship that really validated that I needed to make a transition in my career and explore what it would take to break free from all the things that had me bound, all the grief and the sorrow and the pain and the struggle. And as a result of taking that deep dive myself and finding out that I could literally free myself from all of that, I discovered a new passion, and that was to take what I'd learned and help others. And so that's how I became a coach.
I know it's sometimes hard for you to kind of go back to what your thoughts were at that night and during that time period where so many of your family and friends and loved ones and obviously your son had passed away. What were some of the thoughts that you were having at that time? And help us understand how you got through and pushed through some of those thoughts, because obviously that's a very tough decision to actually continue to push forward and press on after those major tragedies.
I'm so disconnected from the pain now that I even have a hard time accessing that, Dan. And I know that goes against the way that most of the world views those kinds of deaths. You hear things like, well, the pain will never go away, the hole in your heart will never heal. It doesn't get better. You just learn how to deal with it. And I don't know where that came from and why that still exists, because I've taken a completely different path. And now when I think about my first son, I could be right there in the pre-op watching him die in my arms without that pain. Because when I think about what he contributed to my life, what he and I experienced during the 5 years that he was alive, that's where my mind goes. That's where my heart is anchored. It's in that. It's in.
Well, what did you do to get to that place? Because I think, I know that there's some people listening right now that are in our audience that have dealt with similar things, and, they might still be stuck in the pain. Like, how did you get yourself to that point where you don't have to always be, dwelling on the pain of the loss of that loved one?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer because it took a long time for me to get to the point where I could move forward freely. It included journaling. I did a tremendous amount of reading, probably poured through somewhere north of 10,000 books looking for answers. I studied NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I got certified in hypnosis. So I took and explored all these different paths. I dug deep in the Bible. I did a lot of praying and meditating, searching for answers. And little by little, I developed some courage, and that courage led me to make some decisions that were counter to everything that I had observed through others who had experienced similar things to me. And that courage empowered me to decide that staying hung up in the sorrow and in the pain and in the grief was not useful. It wasn't serving humanity. It wasn't serving me and my future. It wasn't serving my family to stay there. And so I made a decision that I would move on, and that I would, when I look back on those experiences, that I would look for and find all the wonderful things that they brought into my life instead of the pain and the sorrow that I experienced because of the death and the loss.
So Les, I think you're very right about the tremendous amount of courage that something like that takes. And also, realizing that our life still has a purpose, and that's how you get through something like that. I'm wondering if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about how that has made you a unique coach for entrepreneurs and how you are uniquely able to help other people who may or may not be dealing with something quite as tragic as that, but all of us have difficulties, right, that we've been through on some level.
Sure.
So how does that enable you to uniquely help other entrepreneurs as a coach?
Well, the reason I got to this place where I'm now referring to Entre Coach as a simplification coaching company is because I discovered in my own life as an entrepreneur and in the lives of my interactions with many other entrepreneurs that we all reach a place at some point in our growth where we run headlong into a wall of complexity. In many cases, it's invisible. You can't even see it. And in order to get past the wall, you have to find a way to simplify everything. And the way my mind works, it's kind of conceptually and big picture. I imagined that there were, as I was beginning to develop the concepts for Entre Coach, I imagined that there were all of these weights that I was carrying, and somehow I had to free myself from each of those weights if I was going to continue to move forward. And out of that came some thinking models and growth concepts that can help an entrepreneur very quickly to bring simplification to an area of their life, whether it's in their business or in their personal life. And I'm of the belief that you can't separate your professional life from your personal life. And so if the foundation of your personal life is fractured and there's a lot of angst and tension there, then you're going to have a really hard time achieving success that's rewarding in your professional life. And so what I've gone through in my own life, kind of passing through the crucible, has helped me, first of all, with a tremendous amount of empathy. So there's nothing that anybody can go through that, first of all, I haven't gone through myself. And so I can relate, right? It's real to me. And then because I was able to find the courage myself, I'm now able to encourage them that they can find the courage themselves to move on and break free from whatever's holding them back.
I think, one of the things that I keep on thinking about with this situation is, I have somebody close in my family that we lost a couple years ago. And there's people in my family that still haven't got over it yet. And I don't want to necessarily say that, you need to get over it, but that's not the right word to use or the right phrase to use, but to be able to, instead of continually dwelling on your mind on, what could that person have done if they had not died? So I think that's where a lot of people get stuck is they look at somebody like, for example, your son at 5 years old. What could he have been doing at this point if he was still alive? Versus what you're saying is, instead of dwelling on that, because you can't change that, dwell on what he did in those first 5 years,
Right.
Dwell on what their life was about, why they were here on this earth. God gives us a reason for being on this earth, and there was a reason for him to be here for those 5 years.
Yeah, and how can I use that to be better myself? Because I am still here, and I do have control over what I can do with my life. So, yeah, good point. Good point, Dan.
Let's shift to a different tough decision here. What is another tough decision that you had in your coaching business?
Well, so when I first started coaching, there wasn't this industry called the coaching industry. It was ill-defined. There wasn't any real structure to it. There were obviously very successful coaches out there doing the work, but you didn't hear about it like you do today. I mean, coaches are a dime a dozen now. So I had to kind of find my way. And when I first moved into the coaching world, it was this great big undefined thing, and I had to make sense of it. And so I would coach anybody. If they fought a mirror, I'd coach them. But what I found out was that you can't save people. They have to be able to save themselves. I learned that from Marshall Goldsmith. He said the key to being a great coach, and I think this is true in every profession, the key to being great in business is to do business with great people. And so it took some time for me to figure out who the great people were for me, so that I got out of it as much as I wanted to get out of it. And as a result, my clients would get as much out of it as they wanted to get out of it. So I've had to iterate a number of times as a coach. And each one of those was a hard decision because I invested time and money and resources in the development of the program and in the marketing campaign and retooling the website and moving in that direction and getting traction and finding clients, only to discover that, man, I don't really want to be here coaching these type of person. This just doesn't do anything for me. And each one of those was a tough decision. I had to stay true to who I am and what I believe my purpose is for being on the planet. And you don't come by those answers easily. And so I just had to keep taking one step after another, exploring and discovering, learning, adjusting until I got dialed in, until I was really fine-tuned and on track. And now I'm in a place, brother, where it's beautiful. It's majestic. I wouldn't want to be any other place in the world.
That's a good place to be when you can say that. And I think what you hit on there was that, entrepreneurs are, I think, for the most part, people that are learning and constantly making adjustments. And that's the kind of thing that you have to do in order to get to where you want to be. I'm wondering, through this series of tough decisions that you just described, have you developed any kind of strategy that you employ over and over to help you make these tough decisions? Do you have something as a go-to?
Yes.
How do you
sure do? If you're out there doing anything at all as an entrepreneur, you're going to encounter obstacles or challenges or problems that you have to figure out how to transform, right? And sometimes that means you don't currently have the capability to do anything about it. And so you have to find a way to deal with it. And so one of the ways that I do it, first of all, I've developed a set of tools, Danae, that I call thinking models that are very good at helping helping me gain perspective from different angles. And the more angles you can see a problem from, the richer your perspective and the more insight you have about how to transform it. But a couple of the routines that I go through is I take very long walks and I talk with myself and God. And that's a special place for me. I mean, when I say a long walk, I'm talking 5, 6, 7, 8 miles. Sometimes I'll walk for 3 or 4 hours talking to myself out loud and with God in an attempt to kind of wrap my head around whatever this problem is. And almost always I end up with a lot more clarity and the courage that I need to make whatever tough decisions that, I'm faced with respect to that problem. That's one. The other that I use that's very powerful, and I would almost call it transcendent, is I developed a program or a thinking habit called Winning Focus. And it's based off the acronym GOALS. And it's, what can I be grateful for? What opportunities can I seize? What next right actions do I need to take? What lessons have I learned? And what successes can I celebrate? And as a result of answering those 5 questions every day, there's something incredible and remarkable that happens to the way your mind works. It begins to adapt to seeing the world through the lens of those 5 questions. And you begin to experience spontaneous gratitude. You start seeing patterns that you didn't see before. Because as you're capturing the lessons that you've learned and the opportunities that you've observed and the successes that you've celebrated, you start, I like to say it like this: you don't know what you think until you see what you wrote, which is a pretty profound statement. And that's why I believe that journaling and developing a habit like Winning Focus is so powerful, is that over time, which is what's important here, because all of this takes patience. There's no quick fixes. And so over time, what happens as a result of using these tools is that you begin to self-identify what's really happening in your world instead of, emotionalizing it. It becomes objective instead of subjective. That makes sense.
That definitely makes sense. And I think you're onto something because, as time goes through, I think we see more and more of what we really are. Time and as we've already talked about, difficulty reveal what's really in us.
Yeah.
Because that comes out.
Yeah. The challenge I think that we all face is that whether we realize it or not, or acknowledge it or not, we all have hypocrisy in us. In other words, we're out of integrity with ourselves. And if you don't have some structure and a methodology for identifying those things, and you can end up so far off the path, heading in the wrong direction, even accelerating in that direction without even realizing it, only to end up someplace where you wish you hadn't gone, and you're paying far more than you ever wanted to pay and staying longer than you wanted to stay. So using some tools like this is a great way to help keep yourself in check and to tighten your focus, and kind of serves as like bumpers, right? You're heading towards this ideal that you've established, and now you need some bumpers to keep you on the straight path heading in that direction. So every new client that I take on board, and you said in the opening, I only coach cream of the crop type entrepreneurs. The first thing I do is give them Winning Focus and ask them to commit to doing that on a daily basis. The transformation is remarkable. They almost immediately regain access to their own resourcefulness, which is where all the answers exist for them, right? I don't know what success is to them. I don't know how to answer those questions for them, but if they regain access to their own resourcefulness, they'll find those answers very quickly.
I love these things that you're talking about. I feel like we could talk for another 20 or 30 minutes about just that. So maybe at some point we can do that. I wanted to see if you could recommend a book. I know you said earlier that you probably read something like 10,000 books during that difficult time experience, but is there one book or maybe a couple that you would recommend to our listeners if they're facing any kind of similar situation?
Sure. I believe there's 3 books every entrepreneur should have on their desk at all times. One of them is a compilation of documents. It's called our country's founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution. Talking about a great way to keep yourself in perspective and to serve as a sort of filter for making all the decisions that you face as an entrepreneur. That's a great one. And then the 2 books that you write yourself, The Winning Focus Habit and Your Focus Planner, whatever that happens to be for you, So you're writing those books as you're moving through your life, and they become the mirror that reveals to you what is really valuable, what's most prioritized for you. Now, that being said, I don't think there's a book that I've read that didn't serve some purpose in my transformation, Danae, and there's just too many of them to pick one book. And that's the reason why I chose to say the 2 books you write yourself plus Our Country's Founding Documents.
Well, I want to shift gears here just a little bit, and I want you to share with us one of the most exciting places you've traveled or item you've purchased or whatever you might want to share with us with the money and the profits that you've made up to this point in your career and life as an entrepreneur.
Oh, man, that's a loaded question. My wife and I love to explore and discover new things. So, we like to get off the beaten path. We like to hike. We like to shop. We like to eat at great restaurants. We love to explore downtowns in new cities. And so every one of those has been a great adventure for us. We just, the old saying, home is where you lay your head. Mm-hmm. That's the way we live our lives. And it doesn't matter where we are, we make it home. I was just in Atlanta this last week. I stayed in an Airbnb with a guy from the Middle East who's a new American. It was incredible. I made his home my home. So that's my answer to your question.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And do you have a particular place that you guys have on your bucket list right now that you want to go travel to or something like that?
Yeah, we want to take an extended trip across this beautiful country we call home. We visited probably 40 of the states already, but we want to take a very long extended trip and just go places we haven't gone, revisit some of the places that we've seen in the past, and just spend a lot of quality time with each other. She's my best friend. I'm her best friend. We absolutely adore each other and we adore our lives. And so I can't think of a better bucket list item than that one.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I will tell you that, I think that's one of the most important things, one of the key things in any relationship when it comes to marriage is making sure you find someone that's just not your spouse and not just your wife or your husband, but is somebody that you can call your friend. I had a good, patient of mine years ago that told me, she said, she had lost her husband. And I said, well, what is it about that you miss about your husband? And she said, well, I don't miss that I lost my husband. The problem is that I miss the fact that I lost my best friend. And she always told me, she said, make sure when you find somebody, Dan, that you find somebody that is your best friend. Because at the end of the day, looks will go away. Our mind will eventually start to go away, but you need to find that person that can be your best friend. And, that's one of the reasons why I think Danae and I have been together, as long as we have. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, which isn't a lot, for some people. But in this day and age, it's not as many people get to 10 years anymore.
Right on, brother. My marriage to my wife now, we've been together now for this is our 21st year. It's better today than it was in the beginning. So it's almost like we're still on a honeymoon. Every time I see her, my heart skips a beat. I get a glimmer in my eye. It's just, somebody said, I don't remember who it was. I think it might've been Dan Sullivan. He said, I'm in a relationship with someone I love and it works without us having to work at it. And that's the way it is with my wife and I. It works and it works really, really well without us having to work at it.
Yep. That's a very key point there. Well, I really do appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to be with us today. How can the listeners reach out to you if they want to get some more information from you and start to follow you?
Well, they can visit Entre.coach, which is, short for entrepreneur. So ENTRE.coach. And if they want to talk with me personally, they can get on my schedule very easily using Entre.coach/discovery.
Okay, great. Well, Les, again, thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule. We look forward to having you on a future episode, and I might even send you an email to get you scheduled to come on one of my Saturday episodes, which is called Step Up Your Game with Dan. So I'm looking forward to kind of diving into some more details with you on your experience, and really enjoyed talking with you.
I would love that. I've enjoyed speaking with you and Danae.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net To gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email, where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.